Hi, friends. Welcome again to another episode of Beyond the Clouds, Edge to Edge Transformation. And yes, it's not easy to get to this new world because it's changing every day, looks chaotic. So we have no choice but to glow with the flow. One of the people I met recently, thanks to social media, is Angela Radcliffe. And she is a maestro when it comes to glowing with the flow. Angela, tell us about you. Were you always like this?
Well, thank you for asking this and having me here. It's just lovely to be here. We are all such a collection of our experiences. And for me, that starts way, way back in my youth. I grew up very, very poor. Until I was about 13 years old, we had an outhouse, so no indoor plumbing. And when I mention that to people in this day and age, they're always a little surprised. They ask, did I grow up in a third world country? And I say, if you count Texas as a third world country, the answer is yes. For what we lacked in financial resources, I had really deep nurturing from two parents and a house full of siblings. I'm the oldest of six kids. Because of the lack of financial resources, we were pretty tenacious and pretty scrappy, and we learned sort of how to go and make the best of every situation. That has served me well, because by the time I hit university age, we didn't really have the funds for university. And so early in my career, I found some amazing mentors who said, you're a really good grant writer in continuing medical education. And I said, okay, I'll give it a try. Through a series of events, I ended up in the healthcare space, starting out sort of in the communications space. And then in 2001, one of my younger brothers, Levi, was serving in the US Army. He was in the demarcation line between North and South Korea. So it was a hardship tour, meaning you can't bring your spouse with you. He was a chaplain in the military, 21 years old, the healthiest of all six of us. And he got out of a pool one day and he died. No sign or symptom. And this is back in 2001, a month before 9/11. So our world changed and then the world changed, is how I like to think about it. But that time in our life was incredibly transformative, of course, for my whole family. When you lose someone that close to you, it's very transformative. For me personally, it was also transformative from a career perspective. At the time, I had two young children and I was working still in the healthcare space. But because of my brother's death, a clinician said, hey, listen, I know what your son died of. It's long QT disorder. And a friend of mine is doing this research study at University of Rochester, and you should join this clinical research study. And so our family joined this research study, and it found the gene in our family. And that has saved many, many lives in my family since that time. So I shifted my career to get involved in clinical research, and that became my passion. And so for many years, I worked deeply within the patient engagement space, trying to get people involved in clinical research. And that really set me up for two things. One, it set me up to understand that health literacy is at an atrocious state around the world. 4 out of 5 people don't have what they need to be good stewards of their own healthcare. And then as I got more engaged in the health literacy aspect and realizing why people didn't participate in research because of a number of different things, including equity issues, including the lack of health literacy, including access, I also realized that brochures and websites and communication tools were not going to do what we needed to do. And that's when I first started to get excited about data and digital healthcare. So that is sort of the impetus of my career, and happy to share more about my personal family, which consists of a husband who's a firefighter and medic, and 3 children, 2 adults and 1 11-year-old, and a dog, a rescue dog, Benny.
It's amazing how we all go through our hardship and how it changes us, how it literally reforms us. So thank you for sharing about your brother. I'm sure it was very hard. And even today, when you think about it, it's never easy. I went through similar things. I grew up with an outhouse as well. That's why I don't insist that everything has to be in-house.
That's
I'm
right.
more than happy to learn from people outside my comfort zone. And that's how we met.
That's right.
Also, a couple of my close friends died of cancer when I was still in my 30s. And that's what inspired me and my wife to start a company in estimating the toxicity of medicines. It inspired us to do something for our lost friends. Today, we have many safer medicines. You've been in clinical research for quite some time now, including managing clinical trials.
Yes.
Just 20 years ago, it used to take an exorbitant amount of time to set it up and go through the trials. How did this whole mRNA vaccine for COVID-19 come about in less than a year? You couldn't imagine that 20 years ago. Can you go through the history of how clinical trials have changed, e-clinical trials and all those things, how the FDA regulations have changed? Can you educate us on how clinical trials happen today and what the possibilities are for the future?
So clinical trials have changed a lot, and yet they've stayed very much the same in many ways. And that's sort of the interesting tipping point and inertia we're in right now. For many, many years, clinical research happened in what we like to call perfect patients. White males between the ages of 18 and 65 who had a very specific profile. They met inclusion and exclusion criteria. And then we'd go through a clinical trial and we'd take a long time to recruit the patients and find the people who were the fit. And then we'd go through a phase 1, 2, 3 studies until we finally got to a point where the drug safety and efficacy, et cetera, was proved. And we started to realize, of course, unfortunately, within my career lifetime, that to have patients truly engaged, we actually have to include them in the way we shape drug development. So that meant the trend of what was patient centricity came about. And all of a sudden we were like, oh yeah, maybe we should talk to patients about the trials that we're designing and who they're for. Probably for the first 10 or 15 years of my career in this space, all we talked about was how do we get to patient centricity? And then suddenly data and digital tools started to become more and more emergent in our space. And we started to do things like use programmatic media to attract patients to trials and track different real world evidence and start to think about what could we do to replace a placebo arm with a synthetic cohort. We really started to change the way that drugs were both developed and discovered. High throughput screening was very popular, but now we're able to look at vast amounts of data thanks to large language models and things of that nature. Of course, we didn't call them large language models back in the day, but certainly artificial intelligence has been used in drug discovery for some time. Then we hit this other point that you mentioned, which is just as we're starting to realize maybe we're not doing enough to get all humans involved in trials, and maybe we're not doing enough to change the way that we bring trials to patients, the way we deliver on the development that we're doing. Just as we started to do that, we got hit by the pandemic. At that time, tools like telemedicine were relatively nascent in the space. What we now call decentralized trials or alternative trial delivery models, they were just coming about. And the pandemic forced us to say, wow, not only do we need to reach all humans and get everyone involved because the vaccine needs to work for everyone, but we need to reach outside of our normal bounds of an academic medical center or a commercial research site or a government-funded research center like an NIH. We need to get out in the community and we need to absolutely start bringing trials to patients through a combination of the urgency of the pandemic and these emergent tools. The necessity of using these tools right now for this purpose allowed us to overcome some of the industry barriers and inertia that have stopped us, including regulations. You can't do telemedicine across state lines, for example. And that was wonderful. That's why we got to where we did with the vaccine in record time. I personally participated in the trials from the earliest days. I was in the Pfizer trial, then the Pfizer booster trial. I'm currently in a Moderna booster trial. I believe deeply that if you're going to be in clinical research, you need to walk the talk and you should be participating in studies. And you learn so much. It's sort of like secret shopping for what you do. Unfortunately, the pandemic, we said there was this sort of hashtag going around. It was no going back. But we have slipped back in some ways. We slipped back on equity initiatives. And what's interesting is the regulators are no longer the barrier in our way. We're in our own way in industry. The regulators have said, listen, we want data interoperability. Here's Project Vulcan. Hey, we want to make sure that we are all working together. We're going to give you a mandate to have diversity plans for your trials. We're going to give you a mandate for decentralized trial technology. We're going to try and open the doors, at least in the US. And then, of course, in Europe, there's a lot of forward-thinking stuff going on as far as decentralized trials with the at-home trials initiative, et cetera. Now it's time for us to get out of our own way and capitalize on the momentum. But that's only going to happen if we get really honest with ourselves about what we are and are not willing to do for patients. And I hope that we're really at the beginning of a revolution where patients will truly be driving clinical research and not industry. That's a dream that I have. But that's also because I believe clinical research can impact every social cause we care about.
I love the idea of democratizing clinical trials, really getting patient engagement. I'm very grateful that you are practicing it yourself by going around and participating in clinical trials in spite of that risk factor that people worry about. Tell us a little more about healthcare literacy and how you have been a part of that movement yourself.
Yeah, I had an eye-opening moment many years ago. I had the privilege of attending Stanford's Medicine X conference and doing what they call an oral ignite presentation. At the time, my instinct was I realized that something I cared very deeply about, homelessness and the unhoused, was something that I could change if I participated in research. I realized that one of our issues with health literacy is we have not gained the permission to teach people because we have been unwilling to meet people on topics they truly care about. So I realized that for me, getting the understanding that if I participated in a research study that would be for substance use disorder or for a mental health condition, I have bipolar disorder, I have a child with ADHD, every time we participate in a trial, even as a healthy volunteer, in one of those two topic areas, substance use or brain health, we are potentially stopping people from becoming homeless in the first place. So you can go and you can serve at a soup kitchen, and I encourage you to do so. There's nothing more gratifying than being in the community, and nothing that will bring you more humility about how your life is and how we are all meant to serve one another, like serving in a community in that way. But there's a different way to serve, and that way to serve is to find something that can have a broader impact. And so for me, this moment where I realized if I participate in these types of trials, I'm stopping someone from ending up in that shelter to serve, because a lot of the root cause of unhoused and other food insecurity, some of these other major causes, climate change, racial inequality, a lot of these things can actually be solved by tackling some connected or comorbid healthcare condition, because in many cases, health is at the root cause, or one of those social issues is at the root cause of health. And so they're inextricably interwoven. But if we want permission to teach and to gift health literacy to everyone, we have to be willing to do it around something that they actually care about. We can't say, let me explain to you how this medical report works. The worst time to invite someone into a clinical trial is when they're dying of cancer. And that is often when we invite people into clinical research. We say, okay, now that we've given you a stage 4 diagnosis and there's nothing available for you, how about you try this research? We're going to put you in a trial. Trying to explain all the nuance of what clinical research participation is like to someone who is facing losing years with their loved ones. That's a very difficult thing that we're asking people to do. And so if we want true health literacy, it starts up the chain, connecting with people and the things they care about and helping them understand that clinical research in healthcare can impact everything that most of us truly care about.
Very true. Now, when you're hungry, that's not the time you go looking for a farm or for a chicken. That's the time when you have everything ready. What you're doing is really commendable, not only participating in the clinical trial process, but finding ways to educate people way before they are in that almost critical stage. Do you think the newer AI methods and outreaches can help in democratizing, removing that divide we have between who knows and who doesn't, and how we can reach out to people and support them in staying and living healthy, not just physically, but also mentally and emotionally healthy?
I do. I get a little disheartened sometimes. I get calls to offer my advice to various startup companies and VCs in the space. And I would say 80% of the outreach that I get relates to using artificial intelligence to find patients for clinical trials. A lot of people in a lot of different industries have been chasing this $8 billion addressable market of if we could find people to participate in research, there's a lot of money there. Unfortunately, that's solving the wrong problems. We've been able to find patients using, forget even artificial intelligence, just straight up scanning the data and looking through electronic health records. We can find eligible patients. But when you find that patient, if you can't convert that patient, if you can't bring that patient to a state of mind where they're willing to be active in their own healthcare, it's sort of like saying, we'd like apples on these trees, but we never planted the seeds, right? So a lot of the way people think about using this tech is still the same thing. Can we find these patients? how about we figure out how we can activate the patients? So that's the first thing. But the other thing is to your point of like true democratization, I saw some amazing things at that conference back in, it was 2017, the last time I was at MedEx. I saw a father get up on a stage with his daughter. She had to be maybe 8 years old. She had a very rare disease, and he had an engineering background, and they had fabricated something on a 3D printer and then open sourced the plans for that brace for her arm that allowed her to regain the use of her arm from the rare disease. And only 100 kids in a certain geographic area even have this disease. So what did the dad do? He open sourced these plans. We underestimate the ingenuity of the human spirit when it comes to trying to save our children, our parents, our loved ones. And if we could use the power of artificial intelligence to help ignite that creativity, to give people a true co-pilot in being able to augment what they care about, what they know, teach them more, and then give them the tools that they might not already have, we'd see a very different level of engagement. But that requires us starting early with artificial intelligence literacy. It also is critical that we teach people that AI isn't about AI. It's about data. It's about making sure that our data is fair. For the uninitiated, that's the acronym for findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable. People have to understand that what we're putting into these systems data-wise changes dramatically what we get out of it. It's a very different time now, especially when we're talking about something as critical as our health. It's life or death, what we choose to put into our artificial intelligence algorithms and models. That data is the lifeblood of those systems. And so we have to figure out how to give people the literacy to participate and to understand, or else we are going to see another era where we are going to continue to go along and just click the I accept button, as my friend Richie would say, and just give away all sorts of things without understanding the unintended consequences of what we're doing.
Angela, one thing I find fascinating, both in your writings and now as you speak with the same ease about data science terminology and the AI terminology, not just terms, but concepts, and clinical terminology, discovery, as well as clinical trials. How did you learn all this? There's no course that you can do to learn all of it.
That's such an interesting question. That something that used to be my ceiling has become my superpower. For years, when I would go to apply to a job, they'd scan the resume and say, oh, no formal education. I learned very early that I had to be able to prove almost that we could learn things in different ways and that different people learn things in different ways. While I probably would have done great in university because I was one of those kids who loved school. I was the overachiever. If the teacher asked for a simple project, they got a complex project, mostly from creativity and less from brilliance. But I always had that hunger to learn, and that continues to this day. And one of the things that I feel really lucky for is because I didn't have that formal education, I was forced to find ways to learn and connect concepts together. When I'm learning about data, I need to learn it in a context. Or when I'm learning about life science and research, I need to connect it to something else. I think of myself as a little bit of a constellation builder. I love to look at all the little stars and see how they become a constellation. That has helped me, that need to be able to be literate myself in boardrooms and on shop floors at the same time. I come from the shop floor background, and yet I succeed in boardrooms now. And the reason for that is it's the literacy. And it is the willingness to get hands-on. And I believe that everyone has the capacity to do that. One of the things that's so important is making sure we're meeting people where they are. That's true in so many places in life. For some people, that is like get in, tinker, play with it. For other people, it is reading and synthesizing and thinking. We just need to allow people to have the environment to do that in the best way that they can. This is what happens when we're faced with something that is adverse or challenging in our life. We either learn to climb over it or we let it sort of block us. And for me, I've always sort of just scrambled my way up. And as soon as I got to that next top, I'm not trying to get to a top. I'm trying to get up a mountain, down a mountain, up a mountain, down a mountain, because that's the only way you get across the complex landscape of life. Nobody's really trying to just summit that one magnificent hill. That's a misnomer. You have to have different techniques to get to different mountaintops. But once you do a couple of different types of mountains, you can sort of map the range. What's really important to me especially as a mom of 3 children who are very different children, to give them their own opportunity to build their own map. You can give your children a map and say, here's how you get from here to here. Or you can say, here's some crayons, here's some markers, here's a pad of paper. Go ahead and draw your own map. I'll give you some starters, and then go out and chart the course yourself. That's a gift we can give our children. We can give them the creativity and the guidance, but let them do it on their own.
That's such a beautiful thought. And to me, the metaphor that came to mind is why only do stargazing when you can do constellation gazing. I see
Yeah.
that you don't just see individual stars because there are billions and billions. You saw those beautiful constellations and how those constellations come together. So thank you for reminding us. And let's get to your new book. You
Well,
talked about mind mapping and you're also talking about heart mapping. Tell us your new book about children, how that's going to empower a lot of people.
sometime this summer, I was sitting down with my daughter. It wasn't school time yet, but I was playing around with ChatGPT. She kind of was peeking over my shoulder. It occurred to her at that moment that maybe she could use AI to help her. She was diagnosed last year with ADHD, and it was a huge relief for us as a family. We always joke that our older children are Stepford kids. They were so easy that my siblings, I would say, like, what are you doing wrong with your kids? These kids are really easy. They're both adults now and still easy kids. And Vivian, our youngest, she always seemed to sort of be everywhere. You couldn't get her off of a task, or you couldn't get her to do a task. So I never really understood the spectrum of ADHD. So when we finally sort of got the label, a lot of parents are afraid to get the label. They don't want to go through a sort of a discovery with their child of their unique abilities because they're afraid they're going to get a label and they're going to get put on medicine. And what do you do? But for us, it was a huge relief because it allowed her to then claim that label as a superpower. So in my quest to sort of support her, and I'm playing around with GPT, and I'd already been using it at work. A lot of my work has been around innovation. We were innovating large language model use in drug discovery and incubating new projects there. And I realized we really missed the boat with health literacy. We cannot miss the boat with AI literacy because daughters like mine and sons all need to be given that empowerment to be part of this right now, not later, not when we've all figured it out as adults, but right now, our children need to be part of this. That's when the kernel of the idea came. The more I got engaged with doing experiments and working with our staff within a large pharmaceutical organization, I realized that we were all just sort of learning as we go. Nobody's really an expert here. So while I've had a lot more exposure to data and AI than most people through my professional career, I led enterprise data governance for a global biopharma company. That's certainly a professional credential that I needed. But was that really what prepared me for artificial intelligence? Absolutely not. It's that hands-on. And so I decided I wasn't going to wait like I did for health literacy. I was going to try and be part of the solution. And so I wrote a book. It's called Quantum Kids, Guardians of AI. It's a story, quest, and activity book. People say, oh, you wrote it so quickly. Well, actually, I wrote it in a very short period of time. It was the concepting that took a long time. Again, it goes back to how are children going to receive information? And some children receive it well through stories, and some children through hands-on activities. And so I decided I was going to do a hybrid of the two. And so the book follows 5 children who go to an international school and they unlock a secret level in their video game. They're invited to go on 7 quests where they can become guardians of artificial intelligence. Each quest is focused on something that I hope is very relatable to kids, but also has a bit of a social impact. We have some of the most social impact astute generation upon us. They really care about what happens to our world and the people around them. And so I tried to tap into that. So there are missions that relate to bullying in school. There are missions that relate to climate change. There are missions that relate to the unhoused. And of course, medicine, because that's a deep passion of mine. In each quest, they learn a couple of the basics. So they learn what machine learning is. They understand what prompt engineering is. And then in each chapter, there's a handful of activities that kids can participate in. And most of them aren't online activities. Just because we're talking artificial intelligence doesn't mean we need our kids just sitting in front of the computer. They need to understand things like pattern recognition. Well, you can learn that through coloring. Prompt engineering is really like doing a Mad Lib. Somebody would say, give me the adjective. Once our children understand the concept of context and they understand that the better they can frame a question, Look, prompt engineering may go away someday. Like maybe AI gets so good that we don't need to prompt it, it prompts us. In the meantime, we should be teaching our children to ask better questions. So even if AI disappeared tomorrow, I feel like the time spent in teaching them the skills they would need to prompt artificial intelligence is something that's going to benefit them long term. It also has a glossary and takes AI terms into a really sort of kid-friendly domain. It helps to think about it like this, and that might be like a video game or like the way you bake cookies. It does have prompts to teach kids how to effectively prompt AI in a number of scenarios, including prompts for young entrepreneurs and things like that. It's meant to give enough variety that different children can find different ways to engage in the topic and learn the foundational things that they need to know, hopefully in a fun way, in a way that will allow them to truly participate and be empowered with artificial intelligence instead of just passively be consumers of, I want to make something cool in Dolly or Midjourney.
It takes a compassionate mom or a compassionate parent to even think about this need, which is to empower them to the point where they become the guardians of AI. It's not us telling them what to do. I was asking one of the AI researchers, how do you help kids get used to it? He said, the problem is with adults, not with the kids. They're
Right.
much more malleable. They will tell you how to use AI, but we may have a blockage there. You brought out something very interesting that I've heard from some of the best researchers. The problem today is not that AI can give us answers. The problem today, which will continue, is that AI cannot ask the best questions because
Yes.
they don't always have the context. They may have the broad context of the whole universal information that's available, but they don't know what Angela's passion is. So, do you talk about those things and how to really ask the most meaningful questions and then how to cross check it so that you can get
Yes.
more meaningful answers?
Yeah. One of the questions I get asked most often, by the way, is did AI help you write the book? And it's an emphatic yes. I actually am a writer by trade. I do deeply believe that we have to show kids that this is how you use it. There's an activity in the book, and it's sort of my favorite book blooper that goes directly to your question, which is I had asked Midjourney to give me a picture of kids in a skate park. The book had already sort of gone out to e-form, and I was about to hit publish on the paperback. That was the format I assumed most people would want because it's an activity book. And so I'm doing due diligence, checking all of my own work. And I look at the picture that I looked at 100 times from Midjourney of these kids in the skate park. And as I'm looking at the image, I realized that the boy who's at the center of the photo is really kind of the main character in the picture. He has skateboards under both feet. And I thought, well, wait a second, that's not how you skateboard. And then I looked even closer at the picture and I noticed that a girl in the back of the picture had like sort of one wheel on a foot. And I decided I wasn't going to have Midjourney recreate that. I was going to ask kids to find what was wrong in that picture. Like, what doesn't look right? One of the things we have to teach them is how do you check AI's work? What you got back is correct or not correct? How do you understand what a hallucination is? It sounds like a really scary term that we just banter about these days. And if you have anyone with mental health issues in your life, as I do, hallucination is a big term. But to teach our children that AI isn't going to always give them the answers. I mean, as they say, a picture is worth 1,000 words. And when you take a peek at this picture and you realize it took me looking at this month after month, day after day to find this. So when I saw that, I was really thankful that in the prompt section, I had included not just prompts, templates that they can copy, which there are plenty, but sort of a way of thinking about prompting and checking your work. I tried to include things in a kid-friendly way. So it's very hard to explain, say, the chain of density prompt, but it's important to teach kids that you can say to AI, okay, thank you for that result, but now I'd like you to go through your own work, AI, and check your own work. And I want you to give me back 2 points that I missed. And I want you to repeat that 5 times. And when you're done doing that, then maybe I'll see something that I missed before. Teaching them things like that. And don't get me wrong, I read hundreds of newsletters and blogs and things of people who are much smarter than me, who are writing new, interesting ways of thinking about prompting every day. I'm trying to adapt that to my own thinking, but we have to teach our kids that stuff too, because you do have to know Sometimes AI is going to give you a picture of a kid with skateboards under both feet, or sometimes AI is going to tell you something about Alexander Hamilton that is completely inaccurate, but you just assume that it's right, because right now when you go to the internet, you also just assume things are right. And as we know, that's not really the case even with the internet. Lots of misinformation lives out there.
Are you saying no Clorox for mRNA? You don't need a clinical trial for Clorox. Just kidding. It's amazing how much misinformation is out there and how many good things are there. Helping children to have that discerning eye, having their own peer group that can help filter a lot of the garbage out there.
When I was working on the parent guide to go along with the book, I did a lot of simulations with AI where I prompted things, because as parents, we have to understand what our children might ask AI. I asked AI to help me with a bullying. I asked AI to pretend it was another 10-year-old boy and to help me with a bullying scenario. And I continued to unfold the scenario in my chat. And as I unfolded the scenario, I explained that I was being bullied because some of the children in school thought that I liked other boys. And then I said I was thinking about hurting myself. I asked some of these tough questions because I wanted to see how AI would respond. Like it or not, we have children who have been living in the TikTok generation. What they see and hear from others in their peer group, which is very loosely defined in this generation, is often inaccurate or harmful. I needed to know if my daughter, unprompted, went on and asked questions, said that girls were picking on her in school and this was the issue, what would happen? So it was very interesting to me to see, the resources that were provided to me as a child, but also to see how AI at this point encouraged me to reach out to an adult, for example. When I pushed back on AI and said things like, well, I don't think my dad would like to hear me say that, or I don't think I would be believed, to see how diligent AI was in encouraging me. It took me a bit of prompting to get AI to then send me a flag that said, hey, what you're saying might be against our guidelines. Now, if I'm a child, do I care that AI is saying, hey, the fact that you just reported potential self-harm to me is against my guidelines as a technology system? We just have to hold an awareness as parents that these are tools and that they have as much potential as any other tool that is useful to us. Heck, fire is incredibly useful to us. My husband is a firefighter because sometimes fire can harm us as well. So we really do have to hold an awareness as parents that our children may use these tools in unintended ways, and we have to get literate ourselves so that we can be the best stewards and guides and Sherpas for our children through this time too.
Thanks, Angela. And I'm so glad that you've done this amazing work. You're truly an angel. Your book and all you've done could be a great gift for little children and their parents. It's a blessed time to really think about how all that we're doing is affecting our families, how we can empower them rather than try to run away. You can't hide from AI, but you can make it augmented intelligence in a meaningful way, because otherwise there are a lot of things that can mislead, just like bad medicines or opioids can hurt us too.
My closing call to action for parents is, as the one place where our children can count on as a safe space, as the true nurturers, I believe it's our responsibility to nurture their creative spirit and their innovation and empower them to find their own way. But don't forget to also nurture and empower yourself. Give yourself the time that you need for self-care. Remember that parenting is an incredibly, incredibly hard job, and it's a gift you're giving not just to your children, but to the world. So thank you to the parents who are taking that hands-on nurturing approach with your children. You are truly, truly making the world a better place with every decision you make. So thank you so much.
Along with compassion for the next generation, there has to be a little bit of self-compassion, taking time out and nurturing too. So Angela, may you continue to glow with the flow as I am right now glowing, thanks to accidental sunlight, which I didn't expect. May you continue to have amazing accidents, and may you continue to write and share your wisdom so that we can all truly co-create an amazing future. And to everybody listening out there, this is the reason I interview people from diverse backgrounds, from diverse viewpoints, because we can't be passive observers. We have to be actively involved in these technologies so that they go in a direction that's most meaningful to us. So thanks again, Angela, and please stay in touch.
Thanks for having me.